communities, parliamentarians and so on, campaigning for Britain to take child refugees into Europe. Here to tell us, into Britain, here to tell us about his campaign in Parliament and forcing the government U-turn on child refugees is former child refugee himself. Please give a very warm welcome to Labour peer Lord Dusk.
We felt on the evidence that there were these young people sleeping rough, 10,000 of them had just disappeared, and isn't that shocking that children should just disappear in Europe? Some of them were in Calais, some in Greece and Italy and so on. And we felt that their need was enormous. And the government then said, well, if you take children from Europe, that will attract more to come. So I said, well, first of all, there's no evidence for that. So we dropped the 3,000 figure. Okay, that meant they couldn't put any money to it. But the sentiment was there, and we added the idea the government should actually start talking to local authorities quickly. Okay? Now, that amendment was then on its way to the Commons, by which time we'd taken more soundings, and there was a pretty good chance the government were going to lose. You know, we had more people coming, they realised what was happening. Even some of the people who did it when I gave them the eye said they were not going to come round. And so the government backed off. And I had the pleasure of seeing the Commons order paper with Theresa May's name on the amendment. These are very important issues. But what is important is that in addition to talking about child refugees, we've got to get rid of the stigma attached to the idea of anybody being a refugee. I was brought up, refugees are people who are fleeing from safety, they're covered by United Nations conventions, and surely it is right that we say refugees have certain rights and we have to stick by them. And one right is that we shouldn't stigmatise them. So I hope that the result of this little effort by me will also help to improve the attitude towards refugees in Britain.
As a union, we work on a number of projects that are based on the UN rights of a child, and clearly those children in the camps are not having their human rights met and their rights under the UN Conventions of a Child met. And those human rights of children and indeed their families are something that we must all campaign on, and we should not make the plight of the refugees and migrants more vulnerable by undermining human rights legislation. We in schools are ready to welcome the children and young people that need to be welcomed into our schools and into our communities. And that's what we in the AT will continue to campaign for.
And I think it's really important that we think about that and focus on that, rightly as the organisers have done, by thinking about what's happening in the referendum debate. Because there is a problem, but it's also an opportunity. And the problem is that this is a chance for some really terrible things to be said in the interest of we've got to have a wide open debate about the referendum and say all these kind of things. But it's also an opportunity to say the kind of things that the Green Party is saying, to put it very simply, to say we celebrate the free movement of people in the EU and enriches all of our lives. Yeah. We're campaigning for a Remain vote in the referendum. Yes. We believe we should work together jointly on the problems that we face. But we're also, our campaign is called Greens for a Better Europe, because what we want is not just free movement of people in the EU, we want to abolish Fortress Europe, the way in which but what we really need to do is elect different people with a different kind of politics. Yeah. And that's what will give us a fair, just, humane immigration system and fair, just, legal, according to the UN Convention, treatment of refugees. Change the politics, we change everything else. The people who've been fooled is by saying, oh, well, you know, why should the people in Europe have free movement when people from other parts of the world aren't able to come to Britain? And I think it's really important that we tackle that head on and say, you know, we don't have any kind of fair, humane immigration policy. That's not the fault of Europe, that's the fault of our government. And say, Europe is not the problem here. I shouldn't personalise it, but hell I will. Theresa May is the problem.
When they cut our education maintenance allowance, that is the biggest impact on young black learners who overwhelmingly receive it. When they trebled our tuition fees, the impact on black students is made worse by the fact of debt being taking longer to pay off because of pay discrimination. And when they cut ESOL courses, they are denying people access of essential skills. When David Cameron made his speech that Muslim women who didn't speak English well enough may be deported, it had nothing to do with the fact of the huge number, 850,000 people in this country that don't have the basic language skills. It was more driven by disgusting racism, Islamophobia and sexism. I believe these women need education and training and not surveillance and suspicion. It shows once again that when it comes down to meeting the needs of migrant communities, of black communities, of women and disabled people, the Tories just don't have a clue. As I mentioned, prevent. We have to challenge this totally uncounterproductive policy that demonises Muslim students. Muslim students should be that, students, not suspects.
The headline dates from 1938 and the article was 1905. And they weren't talking about Syrian refugees, although they might just as well have been. They were talking about what the Sunday Express in 1938 described as a big influx of foreign Jews overrunning the country. And I don't know if you saw the ghastly headline in yesterday's Daily Express. I don't know what I've got against them today. But yesterday they were running a front page which read, EU threat to family life. And the article said, I didn't buy it, I read it online. The article said that mothers were leading us out of Europe because of the damage that immigration causes to family life. Where do they find this stuff? When my grandparents fled here in the early 1900s from Poland and Russia, they came with so many others who were fleeing persecution and starvation, and they came in fear. Here, thank God, they found refuge. They were able to painstakingly rebuild their lives. But they also found themselves hated again, attacked as aliens who were infesting England, swamping whole areas once populated by English people, and that's a direct quote from the Bishop of Stepney in 1902, and as turning this country into the dumping ground for the scum of Europe. A popular anti-alien movement at the time, the British Brothers, said, "This is England, not the dustbin of Russia and Austria." Together, here today, we recognise those words of hatred. And this time, they're about another people, but it's the same words, and it's the same dynamics. And it is sobering and it is shameful that we as a society are still...
70% of people in Britain would be willing to welcome refugees. And we're part of that 70%. I tell you the people that are not. The government, the Tories that tell lies about refugees. And by the way, this question that was raised about Turkish, there's two things I'm going to say. Turkish people coming to this country. I live in North London. I live amongst Kurds and Turkish people. There's no problem with Turkish and Kurdish people coming to this country. It's a racist argument that's put forward. And actually the idea is considerably mad, the idea that 75 million people are going to come in next week. Right? It's just not true. Right? I know it's great, but it's just not true. The second thing that I want to say is about why we've got this role of making sure that we change what's going on in terms of the racist rhetoric that's taking place. I come from a place called Stratford, East London, Newham. And I don't know if people saw a programme yesterday, which was about the last white person leaving in there. Oh, boo, you can boo now, on the people soon, right? And I'm proud to come from Stratford and then come from Newham. But there are racist lies put about what's going on inside Britain and the rest of this country that blames migrants and refugees for the problems that are taking place. You see, I think that it's brilliant that I grew up hearing 4 different languages being spoken, and I didn't have to go to Eton for that privilege. And we don't have a problem with living together. The people that have a problem with living with us are the Etonians. They are the Etonians who live in separate segregated societies with specialist schools and specialist areas. We don't have a problem. Please do not try and smash up our multicultural society. We will fight to defend it. In this referendum, don't let the races divide us. People are welcome here. And I'll stop.
We've had Muslim communities mobilising up and down the country on various different events and saying refugees must be welcomed here. And I think it's important to have the Muslim communities engage in this campaign because there have been many racist and Islamophobic arguments peddled against welcoming refugees because many of them are from Muslim backgrounds, and particularly after the November Paris attacks with refugees being treated as though they were all potential terrorists. So we're very pleased to be joined by National Council member of the Muslim Council of Britain and co-chair of Stand Up to Racism, Tala Ahmed. Please give a warm welcome.
We had a government which had the audacity to say 3,000 child refugees, we will not take them. And they were pressured and forced to accept that they will take them. There are many others like this. We had a prime minister who stigmatized and demonized one of the most prominent Muslim scholars. You may not agree with him in everything, but nevertheless, this man, he organized against ISIL, and he was called to be a supporter of ISIL. And yet, it took weeks before Prime Minister saw the decency to apologize. But the point is, we have a change. And the reason government changed from accepting several hundred to 20,000 is not because suddenly they had a hard change and realized that they need to grow up and they need to change and they have a transformative effect. It's because they realized that the people in this country will not accept a government which failed to live up to the aspiration of the majority. So I think, we should rightly be proud of the work that we have done. But it isn't enough. We had the refugee crisis, we had the national election, when we had, time and again Prime Minister was too keen to direct our mind to security threats, effectively stigmatizing the Muslim community as being the other. We had the mayoral election, and again, we saw what happened. They tried to tap into not only stigmatizing Muslims, but actually, get involved deep into South Asian politics. Anybody who is familiar with South Asia will know that there are issues in tension between India and Pakistan, flared out by cricket, by politics, by others. And we saw a disgusting attempt to capitalize that kind of nasty politics. And now, we have the EU referendum. It was interesting to hear from Rabbi Miwaks that how EU is having an effect on our family life. I know we're here to talk about refugees, but whether you talk about refugees, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, homophobia, they're all, end of the day, connected to politics. And unfortunately, unless we change politics, unless we change the narrative of politics, we will not win that battle. And for that reason, I think our struggle for creating a better future for refugees, our struggle for creating better government, better society, better politics, I think we need to make sure that on the 23rd of June, I hope I got the date right, we mobilize to bring as many people to cast their vote in favor of remaining. If you disagree, by all means come and